November 24th, 1971. A man in a business suit hijacked a plane, demanded $200,000 in cash, then jumped into a freezing storm at night and vanished forever. How does someone disappear from the sky without leaving a single trace? Portland, Oregon. The rain came down in sheets that Wednesday afternoon, turning the airport tarmac into a mirror of gray sky. Inside the terminal, a man wearing a dark suit and sunglasses walked up to the Northwest Orient counter. He carried a briefcase. He paid cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle. The ticket agent barely looked at him. Just another businessman on just another flight. His name on the ticket read Dan Cooper. Nobody knew if that was real. Nobody asked. In 1971, you didn't need ID to fly. You just needed money. Flight 305 was a Boeing 727. 36 passengers climbed the stairs that afternoon. Yet the man who called himself Cooper sat in seat 18C, right in the middle of the plane. He ordered a bourbon and soda. He lit a cigarette. He looked out the window as the plane lifted off the wet runway at 2:50 in the afternoon. The sky was the color of concrete. Below, the city of Portland disappeared into the mist. The plane climbed through thick clouds, rain streaking across the windows. Inside the cabin, it was warm. The engines hummed. People read newspapers. A few dozed off. It was supposed to be a 30-minute flight. Easy, routine, forgettable. Florence Schaffner was the flight attendant working the aft cabin. She was 23 years old. She'd seen 1,000 businessmen just like this one. Quiet, polite, unremarkable. When he handed her a note, she thought it was his phone number. Men did that sometimes. She smiled and tucked it in her pocket without reading it. Then he leaned forward. His voice was calm. "Miss, you better look at that note. I have a bomb." Florence's hands shook as she unfolded the paper. The words were printed in neat block letters. "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me. You are being hijacked." She looked at his face. He wasn't sweating. He wasn't nervous. His expression hadn't changed at all. He could have been asking for another drink. He opened the briefcase just enough for her to see inside. Red cylinders, wires, a battery, 8 red sticks bundled together. It looked real. Later, nobody could say for sure if it was. Florence sat down next to him. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he could hear it. "What do you want?" she whispered. He told her exactly. $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, a fuel truck ready in Seattle. His voice never changed. He could have been ordering lunch. He even said, "Please." The pilot, William Scott, got the message over the intercom. At first, he thought it was a joke. Then Florence's voice cracked when she repeated the words. He knew it wasn't. Scott had been flying for 20 years. He'd flown in World War II. He'd seen a lot, but he'd never seen this. The FBI was called. The airline executives were called. The Seattle police were called. President Nixon was briefed in the White House. And the passengers sat in their seats drinking coffee, reading magazines, chatting with strangers, completely unaware that the man in 18C held their lives in a briefcase. Northwest Orient agreed to everything. What choice did they have? 36 lives were on that plane. The money didn't matter. The company would pay. The FBI would track the bills. Everything would be fine. They just needed to get everyone down safely. The plane circled Seattle for 2 hours while employees on the ground scrambled to gather the money. 21 pounds of $20 bills, 10,000 bills in total. Every serial number photographed and recorded. 4 parachutes were grabbed from a local skydiving school in a rush. 2 main chutes, 2 reserve chutes. One of them was a training chute, a dummy that wouldn't even open. The instructors didn't have time to check which was which. They just grabbed what they had and ran. At 5:39 p.m., Flight 305 landed in Seattle. The rain was heavier now. The wind had picked up. Cooper's instructions were clear and specific. Everyone gets off except the flight crew. Bring the money and parachutes to the plane. Refuel for Mexico City. Keep the stairs down. No tricks. The passengers filed off into the terminal, confused but alive. Most of them still didn't know what had happened. A few had noticed Florence talking to the man in the sunglasses for too long, but nobody panicked. Nobody screamed. They walked down the stairs into the rain and disappeared into the terminal, grateful to be on solid ground. Cooper stayed in his seat, briefcase on his lap, bourbon in his hand. He didn't move. He didn't look nervous. When the money arrived in a canvas bank bag, he opened it and checked it. He didn't count every bill, but he looked closely. He knew what he was looking at. When the parachutes came, he examined each one. He tested the straps. He checked the cords. He knew what he was doing. He wasn't guessing. This wasn't his first time seeing a parachute. Then he gave the pilots new orders. Fly to Mexico City. Keep the speed under 200 miles per hour. Stay below 10,000 feet. Keep the landing gear down, lower the cabin pressure, and lower the rear stairs before takeoff. The crew tried to argue. Captain Scott came back to talk to him face to face. Flying that slow was dangerous, he explained. The plane wasn't designed for it. The route went over mountains, the Cascade Range. Some peaks were over 10,000 feet tall. A storm was coming in from the Pacific. The temperature outside was already near freezing. It would only get colder. At that altitude, in those conditions with the stairs down, the wind and cold would be unbearable. Cooper didn't care. His expression didn't change. "Just do it," he said. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement. He wasn't asking. He was telling. At 7:40 p.m., the 727 took off again. This time only Cooper and 4 crew members were aboard. The pilot, the co-pilot, the flight engineer, and Tina Mucklow, the flight attendant Cooper had asked to stay. The plane lifted into the black sky. The city lights of Seattle fell away below. Ahead was nothing but darkness and mountains and rain. The rear stairway hung open like a broken jaw. Freezing air screamed through the cabin at 200 miles per hour. The temperature inside dropped to near freezing within minutes. The noise was deafening. Tina sat in the cockpit with the crew, the door locked. Cooper was alone in the cabin with the money and the parachutes. The plane headed south into the storm. Rain hammered the windows. Wind rocked the wings. Lightning flickered in the distance. Below, the wilderness of southern Washington stretched out for hundreds of miles, dense forests, frozen rivers, mountains covered in snow, no roads, no lights. Nothing but darkness. Somewhere over the wilderness, the crew felt a sudden change in air pressure. The instrument panel shifted. The tail of the plane lifted slightly, just a degree or two. The controls felt different in Captain Scott's hands. Something had changed the weight distribution. The flight engineer checked his instruments. The cabin pressure had equalized with the outside. The rear door was fully open now, or something had gone through it. It was 8:13 p.m. Cooper was gone. The crew didn't see him jump. They didn't hear anything over the wind. They just felt the plane change. Captain Scott kept flying. There was nothing else to do. He couldn't turn around. He couldn't land in the mountains. He just kept the speed steady and flew the course Cooper had demanded. When they landed in Reno, Nevada, 2 hours later, the cabin was empty. The briefcase was gone. 2 parachutes were gone. The money was gone. Cooper's tie was on the floor. His cigarette butts were in the ashtray. But the man himself had vanished into the night sky. The FBI rushed onto the plane. They searched every inch. They looked in the bathroom. They checked the overhead bins. They even looked in the cockpit. Nothing. Cooper had jumped somewhere over Washington State into a freezing rainstorm in total darkness with $200,000 strapped to his body. And that's when the real mystery began. The next morning, the FBI launched one of the biggest manhunts in American history. It more than 300 agents spread across 800 square miles of wilderness in Washington State. They searched on foot, in helicopters with dogs and horses. They looked in forests so thick sunlight never touched the ground. They scanned rivers and ravines and ridges covered in snow. They found nothing. The search area was a nightmare. Steep mountains rose thousands of feet from valley floors. Dense pine forests covered everything like a blanket. The Columbia River cut through the landscape like a scar, cold and deep and fast. In late November, the ground was frozen solid. Visibility was almost zero in the valleys. Fog hung in the trees. The temperature dropped below freezing every night. If Cooper had landed in that terrain, in the dark, in the rain, without proper gear, he should have died within hours. His body should have been easy to find, but there was no body, no parachute, no briefcase, no money, just silence. The FBI tore the plane apart looking for clues. They dusted every surface Cooper might have touched. The seat, the armrest, the tray table, the bourbon glass, the ashtray. They found 66 fingerprints that didn't belong to the crew or the passengers. Most of the prints were useless, smudged, or partial. But 8 were clear and complete. They ran them through every database in the country. Military records, criminal records, federal employee files. No match. Cooper's fingerprints didn't exist anywhere in the system. On the floor near seat 18C, they found 8 cigarette butts. Raleigh brand, filter tips. They tested them for saliva. The DNA technology didn't exist yet to do much with it. But they saved the evidence anyway, carefully bagged and labeled. They also found Cooper's clip-on tie. Black. Cheap. The kind you could buy at any department store for a few dollars. It had a silver tie clip still attached, a simple mother-of-pearl design. That tie would haunt investigators for decades. The crew was interviewed over and over. The same questions asked different ways. What did he look like? What did he say? How did he move? What was his voice like? Their descriptions matched almost perfectly. White male. Mid-40s, around 6 feet tall. Maybe 170 to 180 pounds. Dark brown hair, dark eyes, olive or tan skin, like he spent time outdoors. No accent. No distinguishing marks they could see. Polite. Calm. He never raised his voice. He never threatened anyone directly. He said please and thank you. But he knew things. He knew the 727 had a rear stairway that could open during flight. Most people didn't know that. Even most pilots didn't think about it. He knew how to read a parachute rig. He checked the harnesses and buckles like someone who understood what they were for. He knew exactly what altitude and speed to demand. Below 10,000 feet to avoid needing oxygen. Under 200 miles per hour so the wind wouldn't rip him apart. These weren't guesses. This was knowledge. Flight attendant Tina Mucklow sat next to him the longest. She gave the most detailed description. She said he wore dark sunglasses the entire time, even after the sun went down, even in the dim cabin light. He chain-smoked the whole flight. He drank bourbon and water, 2 of them, but never seemed drunk. His hands were steady. His voice never shook. When she asked if doing this meant something to him, if he had a reason, he paused. Then he said yes, he had a grudge. She asked what kind. He smiled and said that didn't matter now. He never explained. The FBI brought in skydiving experts from around the country, military jump instructors, civilian skydivers with thousands of jumps. They all said the same thing. Cooper's jump was suicide. You don't jump from a passenger jet at night in a rainstorm wearing a business suit and loafers. You don't jump without a helmet, without goggles, without a proper jumpsuit. You don't jump without knowing the terrain below. The wind would have been 200 miles per hour. The cold would freeze exposed skin in seconds. The rain would blind you. The darkness would make it impossible to see the ground coming. You'd hit trees or rocks or water and die instantly. And Cooper took the wrong parachutes. The FBI confirmed it. One of the chutes he grabbed was a training dummy, sewn shut, filled with sand for weight. It wouldn't open. If he tried to use it, he fell to his death. Did he know? Did he check? Or did he just grab 2 and hope? The FBI was confident. Cooper was dead. His body was out there somewhere, frozen or buried under snow or washed into a river. They just had to wait for spring. When the snow melted, when hikers came back to the trails, someone would find him. It was only a matter of time. Months passed, then a year, then 2 years, nothing. In 1978, something changed. A boy named Brian Ingram was camping with his family along the Columbia River near Portland. He was 8 years old. They were building a fire pit on the beach. Brian was digging in the sand with a shovel when he hit something solid. He pulled out a rotting stack of $20 bills held together with a rubber band. The bills were decayed, falling apart, stained dark from years in the mud. His father looked at the serial numbers. Something felt wrong. He called the FBI. The serial numbers matched. It was Cooper's money, 3 packets, $5,800. The rubber bands had rotted away to nothing. The bills were so fragile they crumbled when touched. But the location made no sense. The bills were found on a beach along the Columbia River, miles downstream from where Cooper should have jumped. The flight path didn't go over that area. The plane had been much farther east, over the mountains. How did the money get there? Had it washed downstream from somewhere else? Had Cooper survived and buried it? Had someone else found it first and hidden it? The FBI dug up the entire beach. They brought in teams with metal detectors. They sifted through sand for weeks. They searched up and down the riverbank for miles. They found 3 packets of bills, all in the same spot, all buried about 3 feet deep. That was it. The other $194,000 was still missing. Gone. Vanished. The discovery didn't solve anything. It made everything worse. If Cooper died on impact, how did the money end up in the river? If he survived, why would he bury only a tiny fraction of it and leave the rest? Why wouldn't he come back for it? And if someone else found it, why leave any behind? The questions multiplied. The answers disappeared. By 1980, the FBI had interviewed more than 800 suspects. Teachers, veterans, engineers, drifters, con men. Each one seemed possible at first. A name would come in, a tip, a hunch. Agents would track them down. Then the alibis checked out, or the physical description didn't match, or the evidence fell apart. The agency was drowning in tips. Some were serious leads from credible witnesses. Most were nonsense. A man in Florida claimed he was Cooper and wanted to confess. Agents flew down. He was 70 years old and couldn't describe the inside of a 727. A woman said her dead husband confessed on his deathbed. Investigators checked his work records. He'd been in a hospital in Chicago the day of the hijacking. A veteran said it was a secret military operation gone wrong. He had no proof. None of it led anywhere. Then the tie became important again. In 2011, 40 years after the hijacking, scientists tested the tie clip and tie fabric using an electron microscope. Technology had advanced. They could see things now that were impossible to detect in 1971. They found microscopic particles embedded in the fibers and the metal. Titanium, stainless steel, pure aluminum, rare earth elements. The combination was very unusual. It pointed to someone who worked in advanced manufacturing, aerospace engineering, chemical plants, maybe even Boeing itself, which had a massive factory complex in the Seattle area. The FBI cross-referenced Boeing employees from 1971, thousands of names. They looked for men who matched Cooper's description and had access to those specific materials. They investigated engineers who worked on the 727, mechanics who serviced the planes, designers who knew the aircraft inside and out. They found dozens of possible matches. They tracked them down one by one. They found no one who went missing after November 1971, no one who suddenly quit their job, no one who suddenly had extra money or changed their lifestyle, no one who fit. But the public didn't let go. The case had become famous. Books were written. TV shows covered it. Theories multiplied like weeds. Some said Cooper was a CIA agent who needed to disappear. Some said he worked for the military and knew too much about secret programs. Some said he planned the hijacking for years, studying planes and parachutes and weather patterns. Others said it was a desperate act by a man with nothing to lose, planned in an afternoon. Witnesses started changing their stories. Decades later, memories had warped and shifted. Flight attendants gave new interviews that contradicted what they'd said in 1971. Details that seemed clear before became fuzzy. Descriptions that matched before suddenly didn't. The man in Seat 18C became a ghost made of conflicting reports and fading memory. Meanwhile, copycats struck. In the 6 months after Cooper's jump, 15 more hijackers tried the same thing. They demanded money and parachutes. They wanted to be the next Cooper. Most were caught on the ground before the planes took off. Some were shot by FBI sharpshooters. A few actually jumped. They all died. Their bodies were found within days, broken on mountainsides or tangled in trees. None succeeded like Cooper did. The government had to act. New laws were passed overnight. Armed marshals were placed on commercial flights for the first time. Metal detectors appeared in airports. Luggage was searched. Passengers were screened. And every single Boeing 727 in America was fitted with a device called a Cooper vane, a mechanical lock that prevented the rear stairs from opening during flight. The modification cost millions. Airlines complained. But the FAA didn't care. Cooper had exposed a flaw. It had to be fixed. Cooper had changed aviation forever. But had he survived? In 1995, a hiker found a torn piece of fabric on a remote logging road near the suspected jump zone. It was old, decayed, covered in moss. The edges were frayed. It looked like parachute material. The hiker called the FBI. Agents drove out to examine it. They tested the fabric in a lab. The results were inconclusive. It might have been from Cooper's parachute. It might have been from a different jump years earlier. And it might have been from something else entirely. There was no way to know for sure. In 2008, children playing near the Columbia River found more rotting bills buried in the mud. Again, the money was too degraded to trace definitively. The serial numbers were unreadable. The bills might have been Cooper's, or they might have been lost in a flood decades ago. The FBI collected them anyway. More evidence that proved nothing. Every lead evaporated like morning fog. Every piece of evidence raised more questions than it answered. One thing became clear. If Cooper died that night, nature had hidden him perfectly. The forests of Washington state are dense, wet, endless. Bodies have disappeared there for far less dramatic reasons. Animals scatter bones within weeks. Rivers carry things miles downstream. Moss and ferns cover everything. Trees fall and rot and become part of the soil. A man lying in those woods would be invisible within a year. Within 10 years, there'd be nothing left to find. But if he lived, if he somehow survived, he did something almost impossible. He jumped from a jet aircraft in freezing rain, in total darkness, with a faulty parachute, over mountainous wilderness, and lived. Then he walked out of the forest, miles through rough terrain, in freezing temperatures carrying 21 pounds of cash. He hid the money. He changed his identity. He disappeared into normal life, and for 50 years, he never spent a single marked bill. For 50 years, he never bragged to a friend, never confessed to a lover, never told a soul. He kept the greatest secret in American crime history until he died, if he died, without ever slipping once. Which story is harder to believe? The FBI agent who spent his entire career hunting Cooper, Ralph Himmelsbach, died in 2008. He never stopped searching. He never got his answer. He retired from the FBI but kept investigating on his own time. He drove the back roads of Washington looking for clues. He interviewed witnesses again and again. He read every tip that came in. In his last interview before he died, a reporter asked if he thought Cooper survived. Himmelsbach paused for a long time. Then he said the jump haunted him because it shouldn't have worked. Everything about it was wrong. The weather, the equipment, the darkness, the terrain. Cooper should have died. But maybe, somehow, impossibly, he didn't. In 2016, the FBI officially closed the active investigation. Not solved, just closed. They said they'd exhausted every credible lead. The evidence was boxed up and sent to storage. 60,000 pages of reports, thousands of photographs, hundreds of tips. The file was marked inactive. But they never said Cooper was dead. They never said he was alive. They just said they didn't know. And somewhere in those dark woods, or in an unmarked grave, or perhaps sitting in a chair somewhere under a new name, the truth waits. Today, the D.B. Cooper case is the only unsolved airplane hijacking in United States history. The file is officially closed, but it's not forgotten. It lives on in documentaries, podcasts, books, museum exhibits, and endless conspiracy theories. Every few years, someone claims they've found new evidence. A deathbed confession, a hidden parachute, a map with an X. Every few years, the story comes roaring back into the news, and every time, it leads nowhere. What happened to the people involved? Tina Mucklow, the flight attendant who sat next to Cooper, refused almost every interview request for decades. She didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to remember. Eventually, she became a nun and joined a quiet religious community. In one of her rare statements, she said the hijacking changed her forever, though she never explained exactly how. She said she prayed for Cooper sometimes, whoever he was, wherever he ended up. The other crew members scattered after that night. Some gave interviews over the years, some appeared in documentaries, others stayed completely silent. Pilot William Scott retired a few years later and moved to a small town. He told his family he just wanted to forget the whole thing. He never wanted to talk about Cooper again. He died in 1987 without ever knowing what happened. Ralph Himmelsbach, the FBI agent who led the investigation, spent the rest of his life obsessed with the case. He wrote a book about it. He gave lectures at colleges and conferences. He chased down tips even after he officially retired. He kept files in his home office. He studied maps. He walked the forests. The case consumed him in a way few cases ever do. When he died in 2008, his family found boxes of Cooper research in his garage. Notes, photographs, theories scribbled on napkins. He'd never stopped looking. The boy who found the money, Brian Ingram, kept some of the decayed bills after the FBI investigation concluded. The rest went to museums and private collectors. Those rotting $20 bills are worth thousands of dollars now, not because of their face value, but because they're pieces of an unsolved mystery. They sit in glass cases in museums. People stare at them. They look so ordinary, just money. But they represent something bigger, a question without an answer. And the town of Ariel, Washington, where Cooper most likely jumped based on the flight path calculations, has become a strange kind of shrine. Every year on the anniversary of the hijacking, November 24th, people gather at a small bar in town. They drink. They tell stories. They argue about theories late into the night. Some believe Cooper was a working-class hero who stuck it to the system. Some think he was a fool who got lucky. Some think he was a ghost or a myth that never really existed. Everyone has an opinion. Nobody has proof. The FBI says they still receive tips about Cooper. Not as many as before, but they still come in. Someone's grandfather confessed on his deathbed. A relative found strange money in an attic. A hiker saw something unusual in the woods. Most tips are investigated briefly and dismissed, but they keep coming, year after year, because people can't let go of the mystery. What do we still not know? Almost everything that matters. We don't know Cooper's real name. We don't know if he lived or died that night. We don't know why only some of the money ended up in the river. We don't know if he worked alone or had help waiting on the ground. We don't know his real motive beyond a grudge. We don't know if he was trained by the military or just studied parachutes at a library. We don't know if he's buried in the forest or living under a new name in another state. The only thing we know for absolute certain is that on November 24th, 1971, It's a man bought a ticket, hijacked a plane, demanded $200,000, and jumped into a storm. Everything after that moment is speculation, theory, and educated guessing. Modern technology wouldn't help much if it happened today. Yes, we have better cameras and tracking systems. Yes, we have DNA databases and facial recognition. But if Cooper jumped today into the same wilderness, the forest would still swallow him. Forests don't care about technology. Rivers don't care about surveillance cameras. The Pacific Northwest is vast and wild and indifferent to human questions. It keeps secrets the way it always has. Maybe that's the real answer. Not that Cooper was brilliant or exceptionally lucky, but that he understood something fundamental about the world. He understood that there are still places where a person can vanish, places where nature is stronger than evidence, places beyond the reach of cameras, fingerprints, DNA tests, and federal investigations, places where the modern world simply ends and the wild begins. He found the gap between what we think we control and what we actually control, and he jumped straight into it. 50 years later, investigators openly admit they may never know the truth. The case file is over 60,000 pages long. Hundreds of agents worked it over the decades. Thousands of hours were spent searching forests and interviewing witnesses. Millions of dollars were spent on the investigation, and it all led to the same place. Nowhere. No answers. No body. No closure. The families of those 36 passengers moved on with their lives. Most of them don't think about that day anymore. The airline moved on. Northwest Orient doesn't even exist anymore, merged and absorbed into other companies. The country moved on. New hijackings happened. New mysteries emerged. But the question about Cooper didn't move on. It stayed. Because somewhere out there, the answer exists. Not a theory. Not a guess. The actual truth. Cooper knows what happened, if he's still alive. The woods might know, if they could speak. The river might know, if it remembers. But those are the only witnesses, and none of them are talking. And that's what makes people keep searching, even now. Not the money, which has probably rotted to nothing by now. Not the fame, because there's no fame in finding a 50-year-old corpse, but the unbearable weight of an unanswered question. The maddening reality that one man outsmarted an entire nation or died trying, and we'll never know which. That's what haunts people. The not knowing. The case is closed. The file is in storage. The agents have retired or died. But the mystery isn't closed. It never will be. So, the next time you're on a plane, look around at your fellow passengers. Look at the quiet ones in business suits. The ones who don't make eye contact. The ones who pay cash and travel light. The ones reading books or staring out windows. Ask yourself, could they do it? Could anyone today pull off what Cooper did? The answer is probably no. Security is too tight now. The technology is too advanced. The Cooper veins prevent the rear stairs from opening. Armed marshals watch the cabins. It couldn't happen again the same way. But Cooper proved that the answer is maybe. And maybe, in a world that demands certainty, is the most unsettling answer of all. Maybe he died in the woods. Maybe he's buried under 50 years of leaves and snow. Maybe his bones are scattered across a mountainside. Or maybe he lived. Maybe he walked out of that forest. Maybe he spent the money slowly over decades. Maybe he died of old age in a nursing home last year, his secret intact. Maybe we'll never know. And that possibility, that eternal maybe, is what keeps the story alive. Because humans hate unanswered questions more than almost anything. We need closure. We need endings. We need to know. But sometimes the world doesn't give us that. Sometimes a man jumps into the darkness and never comes back, and all we're left with is the jump itself, frozen forever at 8:13 p.m. on a rainy November night, and the terrible silence that followed.